6 March 1967, Frankfurt am Main. A judge sits in chambers before the afternoon session. He opens a grey notebook, writes in a narrow hand, "I am the same age as the men in the dock. We took different trains in 1942. Now I must pretend the tracks never crossed." It is a dangerous, honest line. In 1967, in Frankfurt, a line like that travels by whisper, not by speech. The judge writes it anyway. It is his thesis, his confession, his job description. It fits inside the mechanics of a trial, the arithmetic of a country measuring itself. The same city, a different year, May 1945. A railway junction with no trains, a bridge over the Main with no span, streets collapsed to basements. Frankfurt is rubble. Berlin is rubble. Cologne is a cathedral with a broken mouth and miles of stones around it. The arithmetic of the rubble is public, 400 million cubic meters. You can count it with wheelbarrows and shoulders. He is not a judge in 1945. He is 25. His name is Karl. He has a field grey coat without buttons. He has a back pay chit stamped by a disbanded regiment. He walks home to a street where the street is buried. He learns a new profession, moving bricks. A photograph from a U.S. Army occupation report for Hesse, September 1945, shows women in headscarves, men with shell-shocked faces, a handwritten caption, "True Emma Frauen clearing main thoroughfare." Civilians list missing. The list of missing entries runs longer than the street. Karl's mother keeps a notebook by the stove. Names, dates last seen, rumors about camps, rumors about the East, rumors about the West. Karl takes a shovel. He does not speak much. He eats as little as everyone else. The mathematics of calories is typed on ration cards. Adults, 1,000 calories a day in the hunger winter of 1946-47. Children, 800. Heavy laborers get 30% more, a dream printed in ink. You can spend the afternoon calculating your stomach. A police report from Frankfurt, January 1947, cigarettes now used in place of Reichsmarks for nearly all street transactions. The arithmetic of exchange is simple. 1 egg, 2 American cigarettes, a pair of warm socks, 8 cigarettes, an afternoon of work shifting rubble, 10 cigarettes. An accusation paid in silence. The occupation forces arrive with jeeps and protocols. Curfews, then zones. The British in the north and west. The Americans in the south and west. The French at the edges. The Soviets to the east. A private first class with a notebook writes in the U.S. Army Intelligence Summary for Hesse, November 1945. Population fearful of retribution. Prevalent claim of non-participation. The claim is itself a ration. It buys time. It buys entry to a new order that is not yet built. He hears about camps from the outside first, not from his old neighbors, but from a displaced persons camp in Zielsheim, just west of Frankfurt, set up in late 1945. A United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration report concludes population of Zielsheim DP area to be approximately 6,000, majority Jewish survivors from Eastern Europe, conditions improving, relations with German locals strained but manageable with police presence. Karl stands with a cousin outside the fence, an onlooker. Inside, a wedding under a sheet held by 4 hands. Outside, a cigarette. He feels the difference between inside and outside like a draft through an open door. He has seen the photographs in American leaflets, corpses, wire, sunken faces. His own photographs show men in trenches and Russian snow. The arithmetic of knowing is unstable. Each side arrives with its own sums. Denazification begins in forms, not in trials. The questionnaire is 31 questions long in the American zone. The title is stark, Fragebogen. The font is serious. The questions are precise, and then they multiply into ambiguity. Were you a member of the NSDAP? Were you a member of any affiliated organizations? Did you donate? Did you wear the brown shirt? Did you wear the brown shirt? Did you teach? Did you administer? What was your rank? Rank is a ladder both up and down. People climb it when asked. People descend it when the form is in front of them. Karl fills his out in early 1946. He writes, "Student, military service, no party membership." His father had joined a trade association folded into the Nazi system. He lists it with small letters. An American officer, a translator, and a German clerk look at his answers. He is stamped Mitläufer, follower. He is in the statistical majority. Some become belastet, offenders. A few hauptschuldig, major offenders. Some, rare, entlastate, exonerated. The arithmetic of guilt is announced in categories. Almost 13 million Germans are processed, according to occupation reports and Bundesarchiv records. The numbers array themselves across the map like a census of the past. In the end, only a small minority is barred from employment. A smaller number is imprisoned. A smaller number than that will remain in prison past 1951. Stability is a policy goal. The new German administration states it plainly. In memoranda and in practice, we need teachers, police, engineers, judges, civil servants. Many of them were in those roles before. The file in one office goes from a drawer marked party to a drawer marked personnel. The slogans change, the desks do not. A Sprechkammer hearing in Wiesbaden, October 1947. The panel is German, overseen by the American military government. Witnesses testify. The accused nods, shrugs, speaks about orders, about fear, about family. He says, as many say, "I was against it in my heart." The transcript writes it down. The Sprechkammer secretary types it up. A question from the chair, preserved in a Hessian State Archives folder. What did you think of the actions against the Jews? The answer, I heard rumors. I did not believe them. The arithmetic of distance is a defense. It is also a practice. Thousands of kilometers away, in Jerusalem, Eichmann will become a noun. But in these years, the internal German process moves at the pace of paper and recovery. The British fill Allied intelligence summaries with numbers and notes, factories, rails, kilowatt hours, calories. They note the black market, but also the rebuilding. An American Economic Cooperation Administration report in 1948 adds a new word, ERP shipments. Marshall Plan trucks pull into German towns like a promise with a tarpaulin. The crates have stenciled letters. The paper says, Economic Recovery Program. The private exchange says, we will trade you money for a particular silence about the past and a particular loudness about the future. In 1948, the currency reform arrives with a rumor. Then it arrives with a stamp on a coupon and long lines at the post office. The Deutsche Mark replaces the Reichsmark. Prices change overnight. Shelves that had been bare fill with goods. The arithmetic of shelves becomes the arithmetic of hope. Ludwig Erhard, the economics minister, speaks the language of markets and cigarettes. He also speaks the language of politics. We need peace, inside and outside. Prosperity is our politics. A photograph in a municipal archive shows Karl holding the first Deutsche Marks he has seen. The bills are crisp, his hands are dirty, his expression is unreadable. The Berlin airlift runs above their heads for a year. Planes land every few minutes. A reporter in Berlin writes, in a paper read across the western zones, donuts falling from the sky. Children wave from rooftops. The arithmetic of the Cold War begins to write itself into calendars. Dates become politics. 1949, two Germanys now. 1951, Article 31. Law reinstates thousands of former civil servants. 1954, amnesties narrow the circle of guilt again. The system needs it bills it from paychecks and quiet offices. It needs courts to function. Judges sit in those courts with biographies like old photographs in desk drawers. Karl studies law at Goethe University Frankfurt. The faculty is a rebuild under the rafters of a building that had once been Gau capital, then a heap. A professor lectures about Roman law. He skips the years 1933–1945 in a sentence. In an oral history recorded in the 1980s, a student from that class says, "We learned the code. We did not learn what the code had meant." The arithmetic of legal education is text and exam. The history remains a rumor passing between paragraphs. He enters the lower judiciary in the mid-1950s. He watches, he writes reports, he sees who sits where. The presiding judge in his court had passed through denazification as a Mitläufer. His district's Staatsanwalt had once been a party member. The percentages reflect the country. Studies compiled later by the Bundesarchiv and the Parliamentary Commission show continuity. 77% of judiciary officials in the early 1950s had been in some form of Nazi organization. Fewer had been senior, most had been members. These numbers are not statistic then. They are faces, signatures, nods in the corridors, advice given to a younger man: stick to the file, stick to the code. Politics is for Parliament. Outside the courts, the city rebuilds. A photograph from 1955 shows a Volkswagen Beetle parked where a crater had been. The street is cobblestone with asphalt overlaid like a scab. A bakery opens with white bags of flour marked USA. The baker's son now delivers in a shiny apron. The black market recedes to corners. Cigarettes turn back into a vice. The arithmetic of daily life is declared solved. People raise glasses to Wirtschaftswunder. Wonder. Children are born in rooms with new wallpaper. Expellees from the East share cellars with natives for a time, then slowly move to their own flats as new housing blocks rise at the edges of towns. The mathematics of rooms plays out again and again. 4 refugees to 1 kitchen, 2 families to 1 toilet, an angry meeting at the town hall. Locals call them Poles, even when they are Germans from Silesia who had never seen Poland. In a 1946 occupation report, a British officer notes, "No cordiality exists between Altbürger and refugees. Fights break out over wood." In Karl's building, a family from Königsberg arrives with a trunk and a silence. They speak differently, eat differently, remember differently, remember differently. They have a letter from an expellee organization, a certificate of suffering, and a demand for a room that is only a demand because they need to sleep somewhere. The arithmetic of resentment is careful and hazardous. Locals say, "We have our own dead." Expellees say, "We lost everything." DP camp residents say, "We lost everyone." The categories become competition. The state writes, "Charter of the German expellees in 1950 to acknowledge a new constituency. We renounce revenge," it declares, and then demands recognition. The charter's language becomes civic scripture in some towns. The presence of DP camps remains like a distant church bell. You can hear it if you stop talking. In Zilsheim, in spring 1946, a writer records an encounter for a Yiddish newspaper. A group of German women in headscarves meet a group of Jewish survivors at the fence. The German women ask for bread. The survivors say they will send bread when they have it. There is a test in that small exchange, an inversion. The survivors have something to give, briefly. The German women stand outside. In the police records, an entry, "Disturbance reported near DP fencing, German civilians reprimanded for begging." The present writes over the past in a single sentence. By the end of the 1950s, the politics of the Cold War harden. The inner German border becomes its own country. West German newspapers list Soviet satellites, then ads for refrigerators. The arithmetic of memory divides into two columns, personal and political. Personal, missing names, missing bodies, a photograph of a fiancé killed in 1943. Political, alliance with the West, rearmament, a new army in 1955, conscription in 1955. For some, the uniform feels like a return. For many, it feels like a necessary pledge. Karl signs nothing beyond the oath he must sign. He thinks about law. He thinks about the old cases the older men never mention. The early trials of the post-war era had been Nuremberg, Dachau, British military courts, French courts. Germans observed them with mixed emotions, fear, resentment, fascination. Sieger Justiz, victor's justice, is a word that slides into conversation and stays there. By 1958, something shifts inside the country. It is small at first. It begins with a case in Ulm, the Ulm Einsatzkommando trial. A police investigation into a wartime killing leads to the uncovering of mass shootings by a unit in Lithuania. The defendants are police officers, not the sensational villains of posters. They are men with addresses and families. The Ulm court convicts 10 men. It is a regional court, not a theatre of geopolitics. The arithmetic of culpability moves from them to us. The Ulm verdict triggers a bureaucratic revolt of sorts, a legal machine turned upon itself. The states coordinate. They establish a central office in Ludwigsburg in December 1958, the Zentrale Stelle der Landesjustizverwaltungen zur Aufklärung nationalsozialistischer Verbrechen. The name is a paragraph. The mission is a sentence. Find crimes, find suspects, send files to prosecutors. Boxes of paper begin to move. The mathematics of boxes is direct. Each folder is a person. Each slip of paper is a day in a camp, a road, a house emptied. A man in Hesse helps push. Fritz Bauer, the Attorney General of Hesse, returns from exile with a sense of obligation that looks like fury in a tailored suit. He is a social democrat, a Jew, a German, a jurist. He knows what is in the files. He also knows who runs the files. He says famously, unguardedly, "When I leave my office, I enter an enemy foreign country." He constructs a legal argument that has to fit into a code written for ordinary murder. Collective crimes must be broken up into individual acts. The arithmetic of one becomes the only path to the arithmetic of 1 million. This is where the law becomes a sieve. Karl watches Bauer at a distance. He knows his allies, his enemies, his dissatisfactions. The machinery starts. Investigators travel. Witnesses are located. Lublinitz, Krakow, Haifa, Brooklyn. Letters arrive, I can testify. Letters arrive, do not contact me again. For each witness who agrees, 10 refuse. For each document that surfaces, a dozen are said to be burned. East German are said to be burned. East German archives sit behind a political barbed wire. Sometimes they send a copy, sometimes they stall. Sometimes they send too much. The judges and prosecutors of Karl's generation are now in chambers. They are in their 40s. They sit with older colleagues who had written death sentences in 1944 for petty theft and now write instructions for criminal chambers about proper courtroom conduct. The arithmetic of continuity is visible in signatures. It will become the subject of student chants by 1968. In 1963, in Frankfurt, the first Auschwitz trial begins. It is not Nuremberg. It is not a military court. It is a regular criminal court in a regular city with theatre and football and sausages. 20. December 1963. Frankfurt am Main. The Schwurgerichtssaal is full. Hans Hofmeier presides. The prosecutors are from Hesse. The press benches are crowded. Survivors sit with translators and notes written in cramped hands. The defendants are SS men from Auschwitz. Guards, a pharmacist. Names in the opening order list read like lines from a different country's phone book. The charges are specific. They have to be. The indictment cannot say Auschwitz. It has to say on or about this date, in this place. You killed this person, or these persons by these means, acting with base motives. The German Penal Code uses phrases like niedrige Beweggründe, low motives. The moral vocabulary struggles to measure industrial murder. The law returns to the only thing it knows: example, proof, act. A man testifies about the Boga swing, a torture device used by SS interrogator Wilhelm Boga. His testimony is steady, then becomes a recitation of pain. The journalist from Die Zeit writes, "The courtroom air changed temperature." The stenographer types. The judge asks him to clarify, not to prove, but to reattach the act to the actor in a way that fits a paragraph in a book printed long before the war. The arithmetic of evidence is brutal in its simplicity. If the witness cannot recall the date, if the notebook has a missing page, if the defendant can show he was on leave, an act disappears into air. The prosecutors bring another witness, then another. The defense returns with tears or arrogance or silence, depending on the day. It is years of this, not rhetoric, names, dates, weather, arguments about signatures on transport lists, arguments about duty rosters. The words, "I had no choice," and "I was ordered," recur until they are like advertisements. The presiding judge tries to maintain the code's dignity. The audience shifts in their seats. A former prisoner from Krakow, now a grocer in Brooklyn, recounts a selection on the ramp in slow sentences. It was morning. A fog. The doctor looked at me and then waved left. The judge asks, "Which doctor?" The witness says, "He wore a white coat. I cannot trust my eyes now." The arithmetic of memory and time fights the arithmetic of proof. The judges count what can be counted. 1,000 invisible stories remain in the air. Karl is assigned to a different chamber during most of the first trial. He follows it anyway, reading the daily reports, asking colleagues in the cafeteria about testimonies. He hears of names that will become notorious in the footnotes of German law: Boga, Kaduk, Kleher, Capesius. The verdicts are a mapped compromise between law and horror. Boga, life. Kleher, life. Others, 3 years, 5 years, 14. The press calls the sentences lenient. The defense calls them draconian. The survivors call them something that no German word catches. The arithmetic of sentence and crime cannot be balanced, and everyone knows it, and the code insists that most of the killings are Beihilfe zum Mord, accessory to murder, not murder itself. The court explains in an office called Auschwitz, doing your job is not automatically murder under this code. You must have chosen the act, not merely done the act. You must be proven to have chosen. The appeals begin. The cases run on into 1966. A second Auschwitz trial opens as the first closes. New defendants. Similar evidence. The cold machinery of the past turns slowly in a room with electric light and translation headphones. The calendar on the wall reads 1966, then 1966, then 1967. The headlines outside the courtroom start to carry different names. Spiegel Affair in 1962 has already shown young Germans what press freedom feels like. In 1967, the chants of 1968 begin in whispers. The students point at the courts, at the universities. Fathers protect fathers. The judge who writes the line in his notebook reads those headlines and feels them as accusation and warning. On 6 March 1967, he is assigned to preside over a day in which a pharmacist is to be examined on his role in the distribution of Zyklon B. The file in front of him is a set of shipments and signatures, not a set of corpses. The arithmetic is the swing of a weight in a clock, ticks that need to align for the law to mark time. He writes the sentence in his notebook with small movements of his pen, as if to keep the motion from spilling into him. I am the same age as the men in the dock. We took different trains in 1942. Now I must pretend the tracks never crossed. His train had gone east, too. He had been on a transport to the front in 1942. He had lost a friend in a village outside Kharkov. He had laid down in a ditch and waited for shells to stop. He had never stood on a ramp with a list and a stick. He had never touched a can of Zyklon. He had passed a column of forced laborers on a road once. He had looked down. He writes none of this in the file, because none of it belongs there. The arithmetic of history is not the arithmetic of a case. Without the East German files, the prosecution often uses survivors to fill gaps. East German officials occasionally feed documents to West German prosecutors when it suits the East's political script. They leak photographs. They send typed copies of captured SS records, sometimes without the originals. West German courts examine copies with reluctance. The Bundesgerichtshof issues guidance on the use of such evidence. The mathematics of the Cold War enters the courtroom disguised as paper. The math of limitation enters too. The statute of limitations for homicide under German law ticks toward midnight in 1965. Parliament debates. Do the years of 1945 to 1949 count toward the limitation period? The arguments are moral and pedantic at once. The result is a deferral, then an extension. Murder remains chargeable for a wider window, and later for no window at all. It is a victory measured in pages of the Bundesschiedsblatt, not in emotions. Jurists cut through calendars with the patience of bookkeepers. The files in Ludwigsburg continue to multiply. The indexers learn to hear the way a place name is spelled by someone who never wrote that language. They learn what is likely a lie and what is likely a confusion of dates. They develop the world's most intimate knowledge of rail timetables. The Zentrale Stelle builds an archive that will outlive many of the witnesses. A clerk in 1962 writes in a marginal note, 3 possible addresses for suspect, inconsistency in date of Bialystok transport. The arithmetic of weeks in 1943 becomes the arithmetic of years in 1963. Karl's workday in 1967 is like any judge's workday with a fissure under it. He adjusts his fountain pen. He asks the defense to restate a question. He rebukes a witness gently for straying from the point. He keeps the file intact. He holds the line of the German code. He does this because it is his job, and because he believes that if law cannot work here, it will not work anywhere. The emotion that everyone brings is real. The mathematics of the code does not incorporate emotion. He thinks about whether he is a coward. He does not find an answer in the code. He does not find one in his notebook either. Schoolbooks in the 1950s and early 1960s had treated the Nazi years like a thunderstorm. It came, it passed. The focus was on the wreckage, the bombings, the hunger, the millions expelled. This was history that placed the German family in the center of the frame, the rest as a storm outside the windows. A comparative survey by the Georg Eckert Institute later shows that Jewish victims and Eastern European dead were footnotes, not because they did not matter, because the arithmetic of the classroom demanded identification, sanity, and the new state needed to be liked by its children. You cannot have a democracy without children who do not hate it. The transitional institution chooses stories to tell. The stories are true in pieces. The untold parts eventually demand a hearing in another room. The Auschwitz trials opened one room. Television and radio leaked the contents into kitchens. People who had said for 20 years, "We did not know," hear testimony that they cannot file under rumor. Some retreat, some harden, some confront their fathers at tables. Oral histories recorded in the 1990s with men and women who were teenagers in the 1960s reveal that the trials were the first time they heard the word Auschwitz spoken without euphemism in their homes. They recall their fathers saying, "This is all exaggerated." They recall their mothers saying, "Be quiet, your grandfather's friend was there." They recall the silence that followed. The arithmetic of family life resists courtrooms. A judge from Karl's circuit writes to a friend in June 1965. "The survivors are the most precise and most imprecise witnesses I have ever heard. The trauma fixes some dates like iron, others dissolve like smoke." His phrase is a description and a defense. It is what law allows a judge to say. The rest is between them and themselves. In the halls of justice and their adjuncts, jurists argue with one another about the doctrine of Beihilfe. To convict for mord as principle, the court must find niedriger Bewegründe. What is a low motive in a system that defines your motive for you? The Bundesgerichtshof decides in a series of judgments that belonging to an extermination machine is not by itself proof of low motives. Under the code, each individual must have acted with cruelty beyond the system. Teaching a dog to attack. Shooting for pleasure. Injecting for sport. The jurisprudence demands a wicked flourish for murder to be murder. The arithmetic of cruelty becomes a test of aesthetics. Critics write that the law is asking for a kind of perversion to elevate the killing to murder, that ordinary organized murder becomes something less. Defenders say, the code must remain itself. If we make it something else, we are moving the target. The sentencings in 1965, 1966, 1967 reflect this jurisprudence. The verdicts are reasonable in code and intolerable in soul. A man who pushed hundreds to their deaths receives a term shorter than one of the witnesses' marriages. A pharmacist receives a sentence for his complicity. The families of the dead protest in an editorial. The judge reads it at breakfast. He does not respond to it in print. He writes in his notebook, "My colleagues and I have turned the most exceptional crimes into ordinary cases so as to keep the code intact, perhaps the only way, perhaps also a way of losing." Outside the courtroom, a student movement grows. In Frankfurt, sociology students distribute leaflets. They rank the professions by their Nazi continuities. Judges rank near the top. In an occupation report from 1947, long forgotten, a British administrator had anticipated this moment without knowing it. Germans are generally law-abiding. When the law appears their own, if it is not perceived as such, they work around it. Our task is to leave them with law they recognize and yet reform its content. The country is in that paradox. The reformed content reveals the unreformed personnel. The arithmetic of legitimacy is a function of time. Karl presides over a property theft case the morning after one day in the Auschwitz trial. A young man has stolen a radio. The file shows a factory job, a new baby, a wife with a second job. He gave the radio to his younger sister. The prosecutor recommends 3 months suspended. The defense wants a fine. Karl tries to weigh this offense and the offenses of the afternoon. He cannot. He stops himself from thinking about it. If he lets those scales cross, everything will collapse. He sentences the young man to a fine. He returns to the trial and reads the next affidavit. He realizes he will not be able to look at radios without seeing forms. At home, the ex-Spelly family's daughter has married a local. They now occupy the 2 rooms upstairs. They share a hallway with Karl's mother. The old country is in the upstairs cupboard, a box of photographs and certificates no one wants to hang. The daughter attends a demonstration for the extension of the statute of limitations. The mother does not understand. She says, "That is over." The daughter says, "It is not." The conversation is the same in millions of homes. The arithmetic of generations is addition and subtraction. What you add to the story, what you subtract from yourself. The files from the early denazification now appear on judges' desks as oblique accomplices to the new prosecution. The Splushkammer reports identify party ranks that now become lines in indictments. Many of the denazified had been categorized as Mitläufer. Their files are retrieved from state archives. The judges look at their younger signatures. They remember the day they themselves stood before a panel. An American colonel had tapped an ash into a tray. A German clerk had asked him if he had taught racial doctrine. He had said no. It was true. The arithmetic of sin had not included pedagogy. Now it includes counting. How many men did you help kill? The math has changed. A letter from a colleague lands on Karl's desk in April 1967, brittle with distance. Have we enlightened the young, or have we transferred our hesitations to them? There is no answer in the jurisprudence. He reads the occupation reports with a historian's interest in the evenings. He skims an Allied intelligence summary from August 1945 that estimated the food situation in Hesse with precision. Per capita daily intake. 500 calories, black market making up the deficit, recommended import increase of 15%. He writes a note in the margin. Our math after the war was about potatoes. Now our math after the war was about potatoes. The jars in the pantry, the tins under the bed, the cigarettes under the table. These were the mathematics of survival. Now the court uses mathematics to locate a man on a day, at a ramp, and turns the assignment into a number in a sentencing guideline. The central office in Ludwigsburg sends over a set of typed abstracts. The header on each says Bundesarchiv B62. Karl admires the calm of the archivists. He knows that calm is work. The extracts give labours of memory a place to live. They give the trials a skeleton. Without them, everything would be flesh that cannot stand. The legal opinions then apply muscle. The verdicts are the body that emerges, incomplete, wounded, breathing. The Germans who had lived next to DP camps now live next to immigrations from the south. Italian guest workers arrive in the 1960s. Later, Greek and Turkish workers. The cities change. The apartment blocks have new voices on staircases. A sociologist writes in 1967 in a city planning journal, "The memory of wartime expulsion makes West Germans more receptive to the uprooted, and yet the structure itself discriminates in housing." The arithmetic of hypocrisy is a fraction, numerator compassion, denominator fear. Karl sees a former SS man in his courtroom, sitting in the audience for an unrelated case, wearing a mouse-grey suit. He looks like an insurance adjuster. This is not a metaphor. He now is an insurance adjuster. He nods at Karl in the hall with the familiarity of habitual administration. Karl does not return the nod. He writes later that night, "We reabsorbed them. It was inevitable. It is not an absolution." He thinks of the older judges who will retire with pensions calculated from both regimes. He thinks of his own pension. He finds no way to think about it except by thinking about the law again. He resents his own failure of imagination. He visits Zielsheim after work one evening in 1967. The DP camp is long gone. The barracks were torn down in 1949. Apartments stand where the fences had been. A supermarket glows. A plaque on a low wall bears an inscription, "Here stood." He watches a young couple buy vegetables in the store. He imagines a wedding under a sheet in the mud. He imagines the sheet laundered and folded in a closet. He imagines the closet painted over. He imagines the paint flaking. The arithmetic of civic memory is layered like plaster. Each layer keeps the shape of what is under it while pretending to be a surface. He returns to court the next day and listens to a survivor from Hungary. The man's German is hesitant. He now lives in Munich. He had passed through Auschwitz in 1944. He gives a date. He gives a train number from his town. The judge asks him, "How do you know the train number?" He replies, "I wrote letters to the people on the committee back home. We compared lists." He smiles. It is a smile that has nothing to do with happiness. It has to do with being certain in a place where certainty is rare. He leaves the courtroom and does not look back. The press coverage is methodical. The reporters learn the code. They learn to write sentences like, "The court found that the defendant acted as an accessory to murder in at least 300 cases." The arithmetic of "at least" becomes a new kind of headline. Prosecutors, under pressure, emphasize the "at least" to signal the vastness they cannot name in law. Critics on the left accuse the courts of minimizing. Critics on the right accuse the courts of dragging the country into the past. The center prefers to read the sports page. An editor at a major daily writes to his reporter in 1965, "Please reduce number of Auschwitz pieces," reader fatigue noted. The sentence is true. It is almost obscene. Journalism is arithmetic too.